full house in the house for those of you that are streaming live. We would love
Your mic is not on.
I've said so many great things. Good evening, welcome, and we are so glad that you are joining us tonight. Despite the technical difficulties, we are grateful for Mercantile Bank and their support of us and our programming. Community Homeworks is a nonprofit organization on a mission to empower our neighbors to sustain safe, sustainable, and dignified homes. We get our fundings from grants, gifts, and donations. So if you feel inclined to make a donation, please do so on our website at communityhomeworks.org. This evening, I am so excited because my green thumb sister is going to teach us about native plants. She is here with the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones, and she's also here with Noel, Ocen. And we are really excited to learn more about native plants. I'm not going to talk because I'm going to let her do the talking. And here we go.
Thanks, Tiana. So I'm hoping this is more discussion style. I really don't like standing in front of people and just giving you a bunch of information. So I'm a Montessori teacher. So I'm hoping that we can have some lively discussion, and then we can talk about native plants outside. We're going to actually measure some space out front here and start planning a curbside garden. So I'm hoping we'll have our discussion and then we'll do some hands-on. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. So before I introduce us and talk about the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones, I would just kind of like to get a feel for you. Why are you interested in native plants? And what are some barriers that you've faced? What has prevented you from planting native plants to date, if that's the case? Pam, I know this doesn't apply to you, but what are some struggles with native plants? Okay, so learn more about native plants and how they can help you. Cool. Anybody else? Megan? Awesome. So Megan has a space that's new to her. That's a hill area, so it's difficult to mow, I'm assuming. And you love pollinators, so you would like to turn that into a pollinator garden. Okay. Anybody else? Helen. Ooh. And there's so many conversations we can have about how having a pollinator garden and a food forest go hand in hand, right? Bring in the pollinators. Anything else to add? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so companion planting. So if you bring the pollinators to your yard using native plants, those same pollinators are going to also pollinate your food plants and trees. Mm-hmm. All right, any other thoughts? Okay, so my name is Jessica Hagen. I am a native plant enthusiast and nature enthusiast all around. My story with the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones started about 8 years ago. So I started working at a local school, and they had just enormous amount of property for a school. But there were a lot of areas where it was either really overgrown or just a bunch of wood chips. And but then there was this small space where there were native wildflowers. And I was working with a woman named Becky at the time, and she's like, you should talk to the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones. You should meet Tom Small and maybe consider writing a grant to obtain some plants for the school. Because we're a nonprofit, we have no budget. So I'm like, ooh, grant, this is great. So I contacted Tom Small, and he stopped by the school, and he explained to me that the Wild Ones do community outreach gardens and programs, and that they did indeed have this $500 grant that our students could write. We secured the grant, and so Tom worked with us to plant a wetland area, and this was an area that had previously just been mowed. There was some wood chips filled in one area, and it was really close to the bike track. And the students had observed that the area was just flooding. They couldn't use the bike track for most of spring and then a big chunk of fall. And so that became our target area. We decided to see if we put native plants there, if we could kind of change the water table in that area. Long story short, we did. Through my interactions with Tom at that time, I became an active member of the Wild Ones, and I started working with Dr. Alexia, who does education and outreach. I started volunteering with him on some of his projects. At that time, like, I loved native wildflowers, right? I loved driving out in the country and seeing all of these beautiful wildflowers, but my knowledge was pretty limited. And it still is, in all fairness. I'm still learning a lot. But I had an immediate connection with Tom, and I just started asking him all the things. So Tom's one of those people, and all of the Wild One elders that I've met are similar in this way, that they love to share information. So Tom would let me email him, call him, stop over if I wanted, find him at every Wild Ones event and just pick his brain. But also what I really, really loved is this cost me nothing. So Tom and the other Wild Ones would be like, here are some plants that you can plant at your school. And eventually we secured a second grant and received an enormous amount of plants through in-kind donations. So Tom dug a bunch of plants from his yard. Dr. Alexia gave us a bunch of plants that had been grown at WMU Greenhouse. And before you know it, we now have a wild campus, and we have about 7 native wildflower areas. We have also planted a lot of native shrubs and trees. So I fell in love with the Wild Ones, and a couple of years ago, I decided to be super active with the Wild Ones. Then the pandemic did happen, so I haven't been real active until last year. I met Noel and started working with Noel in education and outreach. And again, Noel's like, I have all of these plants. You can come get some of these plants and plant them. Just from Noel's yard alone, I have collected plants to plant at Kleinstuck Preserve. We have planted at TMS, so where I work. We have also planted recently, we put in a garden at Axtell Creek Park, which is a local park that we have adopted. We have planted Noel's plants along Axtell Creek. And our hope is to collect seeds from those plants and to get back out into the community. So I'm an enthusiast who's trying to further the mission of the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones because it has personally impacted me in my students' life. And wildflower gardens are gorgeous, but that's just one of the little things about wildflower gardens that we're going to share with you tonight. So that's a lot about me. Noel, do you want to introduce yourself? It was just a little bit of info.
A little bit of info.
Little info.
Okay. Well, I don't come from a scientific background of any kind. In fact, I was raised in Chicago, pretty much cement jungle type of situation, and didn't really know anything much about planting anything until maybe 15, 20 years ago. And when I got to home where I decided I would turn a lot of it into garden. Took me quite a number of years before I ever heard even the term native plants. Didn't have any clue what they were or why they were necessary. And went through a Master Gardener program and listened to a fabulous lecture. You met Tom. Well, I listened to Steve Cato talk, if any of you have heard his name, and pretty much a 1-hour presentation by Steve changed my life dramatically, because instead of just looking at, now I'd like to plant a pretty flower garden, now I had a real mission about what I was going to plant, why I was going to plant it, and how I was going to really organize my yard. And so that's what got me into it. And then met a neighbor who was already involved, and she introduced me to Wild Ones, and kind of, the rest is history, so to speak. And I've loved having Jessica work with me. She's just so exciting and is just become such an expert in this. It's really been fun to have her with me. So enjoy doing this with her.
Oh, thanks, Noel. So who are the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones? We're pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So we're not really that wild, but we do love wild plants. So the Wild Ones mission is to, in summary, is to restore our community, sustain the biodiversity that we have. But our goal is to educate people and get the plants out there. And we're not looking to profit at all. So a couple of the ways that we do this is through plant exchanges. So in the spring and then in the fall, the Wild Ones has a very large plant exchange. This is also a place that I have collected plants from to plant at our school. You can come to the plant exchange with no plants, no knowledge, just an interest. And I guarantee there are going to be a bunch of us walking around really eager to talk to you and geek out about what we think you should plant at your house. We love this stuff. But this plant exchange, the next one is happening September 9th. So up here in big letters, because I want to invite you all to come to the plant exchange. You do not need to be a member of the Wild Ones to come to the plant exchange and to talk to people and collect plants. So twice a year that happens. It's going to happen at Bill and Jesse's home this year. If you look here, the address is on our outline, but we can also share it with you. Before the end of the night, I just want to point this out here. So this is our guest registry. So if you add your name, your email, and your phone number to this tonight, I will send you a follow-up email that will include a lot of links. So a bunch of what we're going to do here tonight is just, I'm going to channel Jocelyn. It's going to be like a toe dip. So in our classroom, we toe dip into a lot of subjects, and we toe dip because we kind of want to test the water, right? But we just want to introduce you to it. We're hoping that the fire will be ignited and you'll have a beautiful watermelon plant out here at the bay. But this is a toe dip. So I'm going to give you a ton of information, and there are going to be a lot of follow-up resources. If you're interested in receiving those resources, please sign this tonight. Okay, so the plant exchange. We also have free monthly programming. So our programs happen at the Portage District Library. Free. You do not need to be a Wild Ones member. And if you're not able to attend in person, you can find all of our programs on our website. It's worth pointing out here, we have a fancy little QR code in the corner. This will take you to the Wild Ones website where you can find all of the things. But again, I'll send something out specifically for the programs in that follow-up email. So why plant native? Let's just brainstorm. Let's do this together. What are some reasons that you can think of why we should plant native plants? And if you don't know, that's fine. We can give you the information. But I think some of you in here have some ideas. Why plant native? Other than to make Jessica happy. It does make me happy. Yeah. They're hardy and more sustainable. What does it mean that a plant is native? What does that mean? It's local. It's adapted to this region, right? So that plant has adapted to this soil, to this air, to this precipitation, to these temperatures. So it's hardy. It thrives here, right? So that's a really great reason to plant native plants. What that means for you is you don't need to fertilize them. You don't need to water them once they're established after the first couple of years. The plants will take care of themselves. They'll naturally fill in the area. So weeding is a thing of the past. Now, I don't want to stand here and be like, it's so easy. You just throw the plants in the ground and you're done, because that's not true. And sometimes I feel like that is the message that's sent out to the world. There is some work. There's some work. Right? You do need to get the plants into the ground. You do need to make sure for the first couple of years that they have what they need to establish themselves. But my thing is like about the 3-year mark. Do you agree? At the 3-year mark, I'm feeling like, yes, I don't need to weed this. At the 5-year mark, I'm like, boom, boom, you're just beautiful and you're gorgeous and you just do all of the things there. So I want to be realistic, 3 to 5 years. Yes, Suzanne. Sorry. Yes, S. No, so there are native plants for every type sun situation or shade. So we have particular plant lists, and I'll show you a couple of resources that you can look at that will help you know whether the plant will grow well in shade or in sun. So let's say you have a very shady backyard. This is an example in case you do. So if you come to the plant exchange and you're like, I have a shady backyard, and I know you personally, and I know that you don't want it to look super weedy, right? Like you want something that's groomed. And so you're going to come to the plant exchange and you're going to be like, hey, Noel, I have a shady backyard and I really like a groomed look. Noel is going to move about the plants, or she's going to give you one right now.
On here. Sorry. The Columbine, for instance. Now, this nice little plant will grow in virtually any light. So it's shade or partial sun or full sun. It's happy in all of those. It might take a little more water in the full sun situation, but it's still a plant that's going to be happy in all of them. It blooms very early in the spring and is one of those plants that the early insects, the early bees, look to for some nectar right at the beginning of the season. So that's an example of the kind of plant that you could put into your shade garden. Oh, bees are not a problem. No, bees are what you're... Bees are not a problem. The bees, actually, they really are not. They truly aren't. Most of our native bees, many of them don't even have stingers. Most of them are solitary bees. They're not bees that are in hives that are very protective and that kind of thing. Most of them. They're not interested in you. They are interested in the flowers that this plant puts out. And that's one thing from my experience in my yard I can tell you for sure. I can go and work in the plants with the bees all around, and the bees, they may bump into me, but they aren't interested in me. They'll go find a flower to sit on. So that's just an example. I didn't mean to interrupt your...
No, that's perfect, Noel. But you make a really good point. So let's say I don't like the flying insects around. Don't plant them next to your stairs, like, or your entry. Almost all of the students who show up in our classroom are scared to work in the gardens because of the bees. So I carefully coach them into working in the gardens with the bees. So right now the goldenrod is just buzzing. Oh my goodness. So many bees around. We are comfortably working in that area without getting stung. So like Noel said, they're not as aggressive as maybe like a honeybee. They're solitary bees. They're going to stick to themselves. If you step on one, it's going to sting you probably. But other than that, you're safe. But if that's something that's important to you and you don't want them buzzing around your door, then you just plant them somewhere else. And so sharing all of that type of information with us, if I'm coming to do a site visit, which you all are invited to have a site visit, that's an information that you would share with me. Be like, hey, I really don't want them in this area because I don't want the bees close to my house, even if they're native, even if they're not going to sting me. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So, so beautification. So native plants are beautiful. There is a large variety of native plants. So we have brought a small sampling here, but we have resources to show you that there are just oodles of different kinds of native plants that can meet your needs. If I really like just wild looking gardens, I have a couple of areas that are groomed, but I'm a no work, type person. I have found that I see more insects and wildlife when I just let it go. So I am the type of person that just throws it all out there. And I think that's beautiful. Some of my coworkers, I don't know for sure how they feel. I think that they think it's beautiful, but you know, it can look kind of wild. So depending on whatever your style is, there's a native garden for you. So beautification is super important. And then biodiversity. So Noel, do you want to share with us what you shared before the class, talking about how the food chain and how biodiversity and why biodiversity is so important and how native plants support us in that way?
Well, very basically, all of the food that we eat, about 80% of the food that we eat is a product of a pollinator, an animal pollinator. That includes your insects, birds, butterflies, all of the various pollinators. So most of your food comes from the work that those little insects do, which is why when I say bees are good, they are, because without those bees, you're not going to get your fruits, you're not going to get your vegetables, and those fruits and vegetables feed the higher levels of animals, so that they are actually at the basis of the food chain for your various meat products as well. So the reason that we need to plant with native plants is because the native plants and the insects evolved throughout the last several 100,000 years together. Our plants did not evolve with the insects that are in Asia. And so consequently, when we bring beautiful, and they are beautiful, ornamental plants from other parts of the world to make our yards look beautiful, unfortunately, our insects who live here can't eat those plants. They don't have the chemical constitution to digest those plants. So when we're talking about planting native, we're really planting to sustain ourselves. We're planting to feed ourselves. And that's why we're really looking at expanding our native plantings.
Yeah, so it sounds pretty good so far, right? Minimal input. You get the free plants from the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones. You probably can get a couple of friends or Jessica to help you plant them, because I love doing this. This is therapy for me. You plant the space. The pollinators come. It increases your home value, right? Because you've just added a gorgeous garden, and it requires minimal effort. So there are no reasons that I can think of to not plant native. However, again, there are a couple of obstacles that we'll talk about in a little bit. Just going back to what Noel says about biodiversity, we brought some information tonight about Homegrown National Park. So not all plants are created equally. So you will find the little flyer here, Homegrown National Park. For our online viewers, the link should be in the comments. And then you will also find the Keystone Species list. So if you can get that out and just have a look at it, I'll turn the mic back to Noel to talk just a little bit about Homegrown National Park. Noel has an amazing presentation on Homegrown National Park that you can find on the Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones website.
I thank you. But the amazing presentation is by the gentleman who developed the Homegrown National Park program by the name of Doug Ptolemy, who is a professor and educator and researcher and environmentalist from at least 30 to 40 years experience. He developed this program because he wants to encourage everyone to become involved in the native plant program. Right now, people think often that, well, we have our national parks, and that's where we can have all of our native plants, and that'll be enough to sustain us. Well, truthfully, it isn't enough to sustain us, and we're making, unfortunately, inroads into those national parks that have deteriorating a lot of that area. What he has decided, what he has looked at is that if we took just the lawns, everything now that is in essentially turf grass, just lawns throughout this country, if we took half of them, the area that half of our lawns covers would be more than the total area of all of our national parks put together, which is what brought him to the name of Homegrown National Park. Because what he's encouraging every one of us to do is take our little corner of the world, whether it be 10 acres or whether it be 10 by 10 yard. Every one of us can take a portion of that and turn it into native plants. And if we just took half of what is now in lawn in this country, we could have an area larger than all of our national parks put together. That's what brings the name of Homegrown National Park. And you'll find in this booklet and in his website a number of suggestions of things that you can do in your own yard. And he is not suggesting that you take every square inch. He's suggesting that you start out with an area that's small, that's something that you feel you can control and can really work with. Instead of trying to do everything all at once, start out with a small piece, and then as you find it appealing and then it's working, you can expand it. That's the whole concept of Homegrown National Park.
Okay. Perfect. So Noel, if we are looking at the keystone native plants, can you just help us understand how to read this?
Okay. If you want to take a look at it, I think it's easiest to get an idea of if you look over in the right two columns where he has identified the number of species of pollinators that are attracted to this plant listed on the left side. So if you start at the top in trees, you'll see the very first one that's listed is the white oak. And the oak trees are without a doubt the most important plants that we have. They support more pollinators than any other plant. And you can see that it already lists 436 different pollinators that are attracted to that particular plant. So as you go down the list, you see he's done it pretty much in order of numbers. And each one of the plants that are listed is a very important plant for supporting our pollinators. Now, we can't all plant every one of these plants, that's for sure. But you can look at, and one of the things that we would do in the site visits would be to look at the plants already in your in your area, and you might already have some of these plants in your yard. And if you don't, you can look at your yard and say, what could my yard accommodate, and very possibly add some of these plants to your yard. Are there any questions on that sheet? Does everybody? It's pretty self-explanatory.
Pretty self-explanatory,
Yeah.
It is. Thanks, Noel. So getting started. So we've told you why plant native, and we've told you how you can connect to the greater community through Homegrown National Park. But how do you really get started? I'm going to be honest, there have been times that the plant has come before the garden. So I will have received a plant like an oak tree, and I'm like, I didn't plan for this. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I end up just sticking it in the ground. But ideally, you're going to plan these native gardens. And this is especially important for those of you that live in the city. So in the city, there are some ordinances that you have to be mindful of. The Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones, we are working on putting together a guiding document to help you avoid being ticketed for weed ordinances. So the best advice that I can give you right now is plan your garden. So if you have a copy of this, or maybe you have the Native Garden Design book, you can flip in here and you can see these sample gardens. So I'm not suggesting that you break out the computer software and you create something like this, but if you want to create something like this would be great. But what I am suggesting that you do is create a diagram or a little map of your garden. So this is going to help you in a lot of different ways. It's going to help you plan as far as what plants do you want when you come to our plant exchange. Do you have this narrow space? How much area are you working with? But this is also what you're going to use to have conversations with the inspector or with the city. So you have a garden design. You also here have a plant list. So you know what these plants are. And maybe you start with just a blank page and you fill in the plant list as you go because you have no plants to get started, but we're going to give you some plants tonight. And then you map it out after you have that information. Regardless, it's important to have some type of planning document like this if you're in the city, so that if you get a violation, you can say, hey, no, actually, those aren't weeds. This is my native garden. This is what I'm hoping to do. This is my plant list. And then hopefully you can also have some signage. So signage goes a long way. I put signs up all over the place because I have a lot of just wild, weedy areas that are not yet native gardens, but I don't want to mow them. I want to start encouraging wildlife to use those areas. And I'm very slowly adding seeds or adding plants that I get from Noel's. So the first thing that I do, because I have had some struggles with administration at my school, not currently, but in the past, it's like, that looks super weedy. It looks like we could lose a child in that area, Jessica. Like, you cannot have these 20-foot tall plants where the children go missing. So what I do is I put in a garden sign, Kalamazoo Area Wild Ones, Monarch Way Station. I have all the signs. Whatever sign that I can get to put up, I do that. Same thing with Leave the Leaves, right? You have an amazing Leave the Leaves sign. So communication is crucial. So weed ordinances, these are just really a good time for us to educate these people. So these people ticketing you or the neighbors complaining, they probably just don't know, right? So we are available to help you navigate those things. Let's see, are we to the site visit part yet? Because that's all going to come in here. Yeah, let's talk about site visits. So we're having this workshop tonight. We are going to chat a little bit before we give you plants, just to get an idea of what your yard looks like and what you're thinking. But we are offering to come to your home or your organization, because we also work with organizations, and do a site visit. So what that means, we're going to stop by your house. We are going to take an inventory of the plants that you have. This is going to include invasive species. So in one of these handouts, there's a list of invasive species that you really want to look out for. So invasive species are plants that do not belong here. And not only do they not belong here, they're invasive. So they're taking over. So they're out competing the native plants. And they're not supportive to wildlife in any way. Some of them look beautiful. Butterfly bush is an example. They look gorgeous. You don't want them, right? Empty calories. So we are going to be honest with you and tell you that your butterfly bush needs to go. However, we're going to do it in a very kind way, and we're going to help you come up with a plan. And I promise not to show up in the middle of the night and take out your butterfly bush. Usually. Okay, so some of you I really know in this group, and I will show up to your house and take out your butterfly bush. But that's because we have history. So we are going to take an inventory. We're going to walk your property with you. We are going to show you, or at least give you instructions, and I'm happy to show you how to do a soil drainage test. This is going to be really important because you're going to notice when we discuss these signs that there are, what does it say on there, Noel? You meet this beautiful, we're losing things. So common milkweed. So this guy likes dry to medium wet soil. So we talked a little bit about before the workshop, what does that mean? Right? Does anybody in here know exactly what that means? Or is this something you'd like to learn more about? Yeah, you'd like to learn more about it. Me too. So we can test this with a soil drainage test. This is fun work for me. I know this is fun work for Jocelyn too. But we'll do this to figure out what is your soil or your soil type. That's going to be super important. Then we're also going to talk to you about a game plan. So like Noel said, and I've made this mistake, you don't want to just rip out like an entire area, like maybe the like 150 feet length of a fence and about 20 feet wide, because what's going to happen is you're going to take all of that sod out, and then you think you have a lot of plants, or this is what happened to me, but it turns out you're only able to plant like an area this size. And now you have all of this exposed soil, which is not great because that soil is going to rinse away when we have a good rainstorm, and the weeds are just going to move in, right? They're just waiting to have that light exposure. So I always recommend, I made a huge mistake. I actually used a rototiller and rototilled this huge area. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, a giant area, and I just had enough plants to plant like this area. So I collected a bunch of seeds. It took me years of weeding. So learn from my mistakes. When we go outside, I'm going to talk to you a little bit how you can do that by just putting a couple plants here and there, throwing up your sign so your administration doesn't think you just have a weedy old garden going, but doing this slowly. Okay. So yeah, I'm happy to show you when we do our site. So there are other people that are wild on the Wild Ones that do really value aesthetics. So I'm thinking of Mike Weiss. Noel's garden is stunning. You know, in my dreams, I would have Noel's garden, but I don't. I just have weedy areas and some gardens like that. But I can help. I really have actually never lost a child to the garden. So just because that's my style of garden, I do acknowledge that that's your style of garden. I do know how to plant your style of garden. So I didn't mention this earlier, but before I became a wild one, I had all sorts of groomed gardens. I was really into just gardening in general. I have beautiful gardens of non-native plants. So I do know how to do that. I do know. So I can help you. I keep wanting to say your name. I can help you make it so that your grandchildren do not get lost in the jungle out back. So that's the site visit. You could also ask us a ton of questions at that time. I will bring you book lists, a ton of other additional resources if you're interested. We have more handouts that I'm happy to bring. Basically, we're going to start a conversation tonight, and you're going to just be my friend forever now because we're going to talk about native plants. Yes, Tiana.
How do you become a wild one?
That's a really good question. You just go wild. Like some of us, it just comes naturally. No. So we do have some membership brochures up here if you are interested in becoming a wild one. So it explains here on the back. So for a household membership, it's $40. For business, it's $250. And then there's a limited income option that's $25. So we are actively working to make membership available to all. So if income is a barrier, it is our goal to still get you a membership. But I also want to let you know that you don't need a membership to do all of these things. You can come to our plant exchange. You can come to our field trips and our programs. You do not have to become a member. But if you'd like to become a member and finances are limited and you're not sure that you could pay the $25, you can let us know and we can work on getting you a membership. So that's how you become a member. All right, is it outdoor time yet? Okay, so the community aspect of this. So when I think about how does native gardens, how does that build community? Well, in a lot of different ways. It connects us all here tonight, connected me with the wild ones, but through plant propagation, through seed collecting, and through dividing your plants, you can spread those out. So again, we're doing the toe dip tonight. I'm hoping that you're going to become super interested. I am hoping that you might be interested in checking out some of our follow-up workshops or programs online, and you might want to learn how to propagate your plants. So this is kind of like me tagging you and saying you're it. So I'm tagging you and you're it. So I'm hoping that you fall in love with native plants and that you want to learn how to collect the seeds and you want to share those seeds. So I did bring some things here to share with you. Portage District Library. I could go on and on and on about all the things that I love about Portage District Library. My favorite thing is this little program right here. So there's the PDL Seed Library. So Portage District Library has a seed catalog. It's adorable. Okay, first of all, if you're just going to want to go see it to look how cute it is. But there are, it is regularly stocked with native wildflower seeds. So something we do as Wild Ones is collect seeds from our own gardens and we package them up and we give them to Portage District Library. You can go to Portage District Library and you can get these seeds. They do ask that you fill out the form and that you check them out just so we can keep track of quantities. I will send a link to you for the Portage District Library seed program in this email. But with these seeds, you can start a garden, again, minimal cost. Now, there is some know-how. I know, Noel, you did the milk jug gardens this year. We did the milk jug gardens at our school. So native seeds do need to go through that cold process. So they do need to have some cool time. Something you can do if you collect seeds, you can collect them and you can put them in the fridge. You could do that, or you can winter sow them. So you can actually sow native wildflower seeds in the fall and even in the winter.
I think virtually everything, just about everything that we've got here this evening came from a winter sowing program.
So 1 year winter sowing program.
Mhm.
So we have programs on our website about winter sowing, but this is also something that if you're really interested in, I would be happy to talk to you about when we do our site visit. So I have some extra seeds that you can check out if you want. A little bit of information on here. But again, this is like a tag, you're it. I'm not saying that you have to eventually collect seeds and give them back to Portage Library. I just hope that you will. So we'll put these friends out. So once you have your seeds, you have your garden, your beautiful garden where the children don't get lost, you can start collecting seeds on your own. So maybe you need this winter therapy like I do, and you collect your seed pods. It's important that you are collecting seeds from the plants that you know those are native plants. So this is why Noel's tags are amazing, because you're going to want to tag these plants and you're going to want to make sure that you are collecting the seed from those native plants and that you're not sending seed out into the world from cultivars or something invasive. Right. So if you're interested in learning more about cleaning up seeds, I have this available for after class. You can come up and check that out. And I have some cute little envelopes. Our students love to clean up the seeds. They love to collect the seeds, sort them, and put them in these little dandy things. Something else that we do is each year we collect a TMS native wildflower seed blend. This works really good for the classroom because the kids do struggle with keeping the seeds separate, right? We go out with our little bags and we collect seeds, and I'll peek in there and I'll be like, oh, that's an entire prairie. I've been doing this long enough that I can recognize most of the seeds, but they really struggle to keep them separate. So we do a blend each year. So if you don't want to collect them and keep them separate in little envelopes, you can do things like blends, right? I usually keep a running list of what I think the plants are that are in this jar, but sometimes it's a mystery. Some of those plants do look a lot alike. I try really hard to keep track, but Okay, so these are things you can play with in a little bit if you'd like. You can also package up some of your own seeds if you'd like. But what I think we should do now, because we are running out of time, is we should head outside and we should do a little bit of a site evaluation. So the Wild Ones are partnering with Community Homeworks. It is our hope to put in a beautiful wildflower garden out front. We would like to use that garden to communicate with people in this neighborhood and others that attend workshops. We would like to use that as a teaching space. So what we are going to do tonight, because community, is we are going to go outside, and my friend Jocelyn, who is obsessed with math, everything to do with math, is going to help us kind of calculate the square footage. We're not going to be super precise. Jocelyn is obsessed with graph paper. This is something I love about her. And so Jocelyn has some graph paper here and a pen. We're going to go outside and we are going to measure the space. And then we're going to talk about what should we consider. There's some very special considerations that we need to take when we are out here in this area because we're next to the road. It's curbside. So if you don't mind, Jason, are you ready to travel? Okay. So Jocelyn, I have some things for you. Okay. Yes, Regina. It would be in the home visit. We can talk more if you're willing to stay after about how to prepare your soil. We could definitely do that tonight. Yeah. All right. So here we go, friends. We're traveling. Field trip time. Be careful of these cords, friends, right here. Oh, you do good. That's amazing.
I had to cut down two different times.
Yeah. All right. So our goal will be to fill in this entire curb area all the way to that parking lot. Like that's my dream. But again, we're going to learn from Jessica's mistakes and we're not going to go all in. So what we're going to do tonight, because I wanted you to come on in over here, just be careful of this. I wanted you to see how do I start the planning process for this. So we decided that we would choose this small area here. But the first thing we need to know is how big is this space, right? Before we decide what plants we're going to use, we need to know how big is this space, what is the soil like, and what is the light like. Like those are three main things that we really need to think about. So we could measure this in several different ways. So Jocelyn loves a meter stick. So we have a meter stick. I like to measure with bananas and I forgot my banana, or we could just be like, this is 17 bananas long. So we would love some volunteers. Huh? I don't usually make sense. So exactly. So Melissa, what I do, I step off my gardens. That's what I do. But I want to show you what are some options if you don't want to step off your garden. Okay, Jocelyn, do you need one? Is there a volunteer that will help Jocelyn with the measurements? So Jocelyn, you're going to be measuring the length and the width, right? Right here. There you go. I have one. Yeah. Just get close. So what Jocelynn's saying for online participants, because you can't hear Jocelyn. So right now you're just seeing her mouth move because she's not mic'd. So what Jocelyn's saying is that she would roughly measure this area and she would use the graph over here and designate 1 square to be 1 square foot. If that doesn't make sense yet, it will. So Jocelyn, you're saying you have approximately 8 feet or 8 squares. Okay. So we think we have 8 here. Mm-hmm. So 80 square feet. Does this look like 80 square feet to anybody? Because it really doesn't look like 80 square feet to me. So this is where Jessica's problem came in with having this giant garden and thinking that 12 plants was going to cover it. Okay, so Jocelyn, let's move here. So
So then I'd mark it over 10 spaces that way.
I can mark it for you. So we're marking 10 spaces over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. This is rectangular, right? So we're going to ish. So we have our 8 by 10. Now, when I go to the plant exchange or when I decide to go plant shopping, I really do need to know that I have 80 square feet. Because let's say I pick up something like the cinquefoil. That takes up more than 1 square foot. You want to plant for the future, I guess is what I want to say. You don't want to cram everything in there. You want to space things out. And then I generally plant in 3s. I like to put little groups of 3s, but I don't know how many plants that I can fit in here until I know what kind of plants that I'm going to plant, right? So what are some things that you think we need to consider when doing a curbside garden? Are there deer around? So let's say, are there deer? Are there deer or cats? What is the light? What else might we need to consider? We're next to a road. They're going to plow, and there's going to be, unfortunately, a lot of salt here, right? So we need salt-tolerant plants. Now, we're next to a road, so let's say I'm trying to exit here. Do I need to be able to see, right? So we still need to have line of sight. So the height of our plants is going to be very important in this garden. So it can't be higher than 2 feet tall. Okay.
For the first 4 feet,
It's probably safe to assume, right, until to the sidewalk in a situation like this. At least halfway there. Okay. So we have some constraints now. That's okay. This is going to narrow down that native plant selection, and we know we have oodles of plants to choose from, so we're okay. So we need to know, are there deer? So maybe we're looking at deer-resistant plants. We need to know about cats or rabbits or what are other pests might be disturbing this area. And then we need to know about light and also considerations for salt tolerance and height. And definitely for drainage. And you can see that drainage is an issue here. This would be a perfect place for a rain garden. We actually chatted about this a little before on how community homeworks could route that water into here. But yeah, drainage is super duper important. So we have our information. We can take this information and we can choose our plants. Yes, sir. We might want to test the soil. So you might want to know what is in the soil and what are some ways that we could test the soil. We can test for drainage. We can also test to see, I don't know, maybe the pH. with native plants, it doesn't matter as much. Noel, do you have any? Do you test for? I don't normally test for pH or other things like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It could, but I think mostly I would only concern myself with that if it was a food garden. So with native plants, I wouldn't worry about that as much because they really work to restore the soil in a lot of different ways. And I don't really care unless I'm eating the food out of that. Hmm. Yeah, you would definitely want to consider that. Yeah. Okay. So how are we on time? What time is it, friends? Okay, so we need to wrap up the workshop for our online participants. However, I would like to invite you to just stick around for a few minutes, talk to us about the plants that we have available for you to take home tonight, and ask any follow-up questions that you have. Are there any questions that you have right now before we close out?
Can I ask a question about
Yes.
when you were talking earlier about, the seed collecting?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always let my plants go to seed for
Yeah.
the birds.
Yep.
I'm thinking the birds will also help
Yep.
spread, like to keep the native plants alive.
Yeah.
Is, like, can you still collect the seeds, say, after whatever is left from the birds, or is it better to collect the seeds?
So each plant is different. So that's a really great question. And there's a really good diagram that I have seen floating around that specifically talks about milkweed and when to collect those pods. There is a preferred time for collection. And there's a lot more that goes into seed collection too, as far as, so it just rained today. I wouldn't go out and collect my pods because they're really wet and you really need to make sure that they're dried out before you store them or they're going to get super funky. Yeah, you don't want to take all of the seed from the birds, right? And we do know that the birds are going to do their part in distributing the seed, but it's okay to collect the seed. Yeah. And if you want to know more about seed collecting, we actually have a really great program link that I can send you for seed collection. Okay. Well, let's head inside and wrap this part up and then talk more about plants. All right, we're wrapping up. Thanks, Jocelyn. You can. Tiana will give her farewell and then we can gather over here by the plants. For online participants, we do have a variety of native plants available for you. If you are interested in plants, you can drop a message to Community Homeworks and we'll be sure to get them to you. So we have common milkweed, swamp milkweed, butterfly milkweed. We have pussy toes. We only have a few nine bark bushes, but we may be able to get more. We have cut-leafed coneflower. We have some black-eyed Susans, and then we have a variety of plants here. So online participants, if you're interested in plants, please let us know. Tiana, it is all you.
Miss Jessica, we are so grateful, and Miss Noel, we are extremely grateful for the time that you spent with us and teaching us about native plants. We are also very grateful for Mercantile Bank and their support of our programming this evening. I wanted to invite you all again to please join us at 812 Bryan Street on Tuesday. You can find us here at 6 o'clock. We're really excited about our fall programming. So we look forward to seeing you all on Tuesdays. And then the virtual aspect of our program will air on Thursdays now. So with that being said, I want to welcome you all again to our center, and we'll see you next time.